things have somewhat improved. As I mentioned to you the last time we spoke, I was not sure how anyone would react to me, anyone in a clerical, a cleric role, a priest, a minister, and so forth. But my sister-in-law convinced me to go to mass with her on Sunday, which I did. She introduced me to her pastor. Her pastor actually wanted to hear my story. He made an appointment to speak with me. I did meet with him. And what I'm just so amazed about is that he wants me to go to Catholic Charities. They have a prison outreach program there.
Okay.
He knows the director, and he said to me, Cassandra, your story will help others. Stop feeling condemned. He said, God has already forgiven you. You've been through it. And he said, I'm going to challenge you to help others. So that's really been the update. I can't even comprehend that I can help someone else, but um, Monsignor Ryan seems very convinced that I can. I'm meeting with Catholic Charities next week. He set up the appointment, and he said if I have no way to get there, he will drive me.
Wow. That's incredible. So what moved you to go to mass in the first place? Well, what made you make that decision?
Something told me you can either stay here and wallow in regret and self-hatred for the rest of your life, or you can get up and do something. Maybe the way that you had a miracle in prison where God sent that guardian angel, Marilyn, to look out for you. Why not? He could do this again. What he did before, he could do again. If the priest is unreceptive, okay, fine, you've learned your lesson. But I thought to myself, there's always a chance that he may want to listen to me. And he did.
That is absolutely wonderful. So that's an incredible step. So how have you dealt with the guilt and with some of the regret that you have? Because I know you had 20 years thinking about it. So
Yeah.
how have you been dealing with that, with those thoughts?
I'm being very realistic. Although things are going in an upward manner, Dr. George, when I'm alone, when I'm by myself or at night, I often have a hard time sleeping because I think about what I did. But it goes back to even allowing, my husband to do what he did to me, in all the years that we were married, to abuse me. I know, look, the word wish, never want to erase. I'm aware of that. And I keep telling myself, Cassandra, you were not in your right frame of mind. If you were in your right frame of mind, you would have done things differently. And Monsignor Ryan said to me, it happened. He said, it's something that you will never forget. But he convinced me, he said, if you are out there to help others, not that the pain will ever disappear, but the pain and the regret will lessen. He said, your biggest thing is you hate yourself. And yeah, that's totally on point. And I could destroy myself with self-hatred,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to. He's given me a sliver of hope, and I'm going to go with it.
So I'm curious, so if you could go back in time, what would you say to yourself back then when you were in the middle of all that abuse? If you could counsel yourself back then, what would you say to yourself back then? How would you?
I would tell the Cassandra from back then, especially when my husband was, physically and mentally abusing me, that there were so many outlets. People make you think that there's no hope, that an abused woman has no hope. She has to deal with it. Oftentimes the police are not helpful. They are in other matters, but with this, they just feel, well, it's a domestic incident. And unfortunately, many wives do go back with their husbands. So, but there were ways. I should have just taken the time to look to see what alternatives there were. There had to have been at least one group out there that would have helped me to get away from him and to take my children. I was of the mindset back then, based on the way that I was raised, that this was my life, that this was what I deserved. No, it was not what I deserved. It may have been my life, but I had the ability to change it, and I did not change it.
So a little bit more specific. So what would the Cassandra today, if there was that conversation, she just go back in time, what words would you say to the Cassandra back then if you could imagine that conversation, if you could just sit her down? What would you tell her?
You I would tell her that this is not God's will for your life. You were made for something better. You were not made to be a human punching ball in all manners, physical, emotional, mental. You're so much better than this. And I would have told her, get out before something drastic happens, before either you're dead, either before he kills you or you kill him. And that's exactly what I did. I killed him.
So if the Cassandra back then could answer you, what would she say?
Are you sure? I've lived with abuse since I was born. What can you show me that things can be different? What advice, not even just advice, what avenues, what concrete avenues could you show me to in order that I can make that determination that things truly can be different? This is all I'm used to. This is exactly what I'm used to. My parents, my uncle, his wife, and with every relationship that I entered into thereafter. You need to show me, stop giving me words, show me something concrete.
Wow, Cassandra, that's really powerful. So, and my guess is if you move into ministry, you may be hearing those words from other young women in the same
Yes, sir.
situation.
I believe that I will because, Dr. George, during my 20 years in prison, I heard those words often from other women, who had come into the facility. And as I told you the last time, many of us spoke. I mean, that's one thing that people do in prison. They gather together, they speak. What did you do? What was your experience? If I heard that in prison, I know that I'll hear that in ministry. I know that. Things don't change. Faces may change, names may change, but situations never change.
Yeah, yeah. You brought up a very good point. And again, you have such great insight. So this Cassandra back then said, you know what, words, everybody can speak words, but please show me. So if you could show her, and again, we're just being hypothetical, what concrete ways would you show her to get out of that situation or to improve her life?
I would take the time and look for different places, contact. Even back then, there had to have been a domestic abuse hotline, but I would have taken that step to show her, Cassandra, look, here's the number. Come on, stay with me. Let's call. They will help you with a concrete plan if you want it. And basically, Dr. George, that's always the bottom line. Do we want that? The Lord asks, that woman, do you want to be healed? And do you truly want to be free? Because we can get into the mindset where, look, you can speak, but I know this is my lot in life.
Yeah.
But you need concrete, concrete solutions for an individual to say no. Somebody say like myself, the Cassandra, another Cassandra from years ago to say to me, Cassandra, I went through this. My husband beat me, he beat my children, whatever, horrific stories occurred, but I'm here to tell you that things can be different. I think that's so important for women in those situations to meet a survivor, so to speak, to say, look, I've been there and I can tell you exactly what steps you should take. I cannot take them for you, but I can direct you.
No, you said a really good, important point. There's two things you brought up is that you can actually walk alongside with somebody, or if you could go back in time, you could walk alongside Cassandra. But then at the end of the day, she really has her own free will. And it sounds like you would just respect her, respect her will. And she may or may not be ready to make that move.
No.
So
No.
would you be able to walk away? What if she wasn't really ready? What if you could go back in time and she wasn't ready to make that move? How would you deal with it?
I mean, admittedly, I would be beyond frustrated. I think that's just, human inclination. But I would just, even if she was not ready, I would continue to check on her to let her know whenever you're ready, here's my number and I'm here and I will help you. I'm not going to just give you words. I am going to be here to help you. If you need a getaway plan, an escape plan, whatever you need, I will help you. But Dr. George, also too, a person can or cannot be ready, but there's so much to deal with the human spirit.
Right.
The
Yeah.
plan could be there, but if I feel that I'm a piece of garbage and I'm not worthy of it, the plan could be right there within my grasp.
Right.
But I have to be at the place to say, yes, I deserve this.
Right. And not everybody will be in that spot. One thing you didn't mention is that, you know what, if she was not ready, you would still be available.
Yes.
And when she's ready, you'd be there. That is just wonderful. I think that's the key. That's the key. So what was this exercise like? I mean, I know we use our imaginations and you went back in time and kind of spoke to your younger self. What was this like as you were doing this? What thoughts, what emotions came to mind?
You mean in counseling the younger Cassandra?
Yeah, what was that like?
Um, when you counsel someone based on your own experience, you have to deal with the pain.
Yeah.
You're unable to squelch the pain. You have to be willing to deal with the pain and the and the negative emotions. And in helping somebody, that's a risk, Dr. George, because so often people look to just they look to bury anything that's unpleasant. But when you're helping somebody, if you want to do it effectively, burying it is not the issue.
Yeah.
You have to be real. And so many people are not. In prison, yes, in prison, most of the women there were real. Why put on? We all knew what we were there for. But when you're outside, it's a whole different thing. I can't come up and like, oh, my life was so perfect, Cassandra, but I know what you're going through, when in fact, I never did.
Right. Right. You have such good insight. Something else you mentioned about being willing to deal with the pain, and I would guess that you may be struggling with this pain, maybe not at the same degree right now, but you may always be dealing with this pain. So for Cassandra today, what are some things that you can do to help with the pain? Because my guess is you'll probably still keep dealing with that.
Yes.
What has helped you in the past when you felt that pain, when you wanted to be comfortable? What's been beneficial?
In prison, I often went to mass and I did go through different Bible studies, most of them non denominational. And I was taught, yes, you are going to have that pain, you are going to have that regret, but you don't have to carry that around because God already forgave you. Is it easier said than done? Absolutely. I mean, Dr. George, I often relive that day. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say, oh, well, I'm in this position now, I can help others. And, my pain is a thing of the past. No, it's not. But I have to put it in a compartment, so to speak, whereas it's not going to engulf me, but the memory of it, the recollection of it will allow me to help others.
Cassandra, I'm gonna have to pause for a second. I'll be right back. I think I hear a client at the door. Hold on for a second, all right?
Of course.
Cassandra, I apologize. I heard some noise outside, and when we do virtual calls, sometimes things happen. So I apologize for
It's no
the pause.
problem.
I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. So
No, not at all. Please don't apologize.
yeah. Do you remember what you were saying, or where you were?
Yes, I was mentioning about the pain.
Right.
And I said, sometimes, not sometimes, many individuals, they bury the pain in order to survive. But if I'm going to help others, I cannot do that.
Okay.
I will have to, I will have to relive the pain. I will have to be real. Um, that's the only way that I can function. I don't relish having to bring this up repeatedly, but if it's the only way for healing, then so be it. I have no choice in the matter. Healing for myself and healing for others.
So let's kind of explore that, because I think, as you're now reacclimating your life outside of prison and moving into a normal life, whatever that may be, you will be experiencing pain. And I think you recognize that. And also, if you choose to move into this ministry, my guess is some of the women that you'll be meeting will probably trigger some of your own pain. So I think it's important that we find some coping skills. So what are some things you think would be beneficial to you when you feel yourself overwhelmed, when you start having those thoughts and those memories? What are some things that have been helpful?
Monsignor Ryan told me to read the story of St. Paul the Apostle,
Hmm.
who, although he killed Christians and he was on a rampage to kill Christians, and he did, God forgave him and God used him. And he said to me, Cassandra, God's not a respecter of persons. If he could use St. Paul, well, previously, Saul of Tarsus, why can't he use you? You have to be, you have to be willing to accept the challenge. And that's essentially what it is. I'm sure Paul may have oftentimes been traumatized by his memories. We don't know that. We just have his written word. I did not, obviously I was not around during that period, but Monsignor said to me, you have to be willing to relive the pain. If you want to help others, he said you could go home, you could live the rest of your life in a closet, in an emotional closet. He said, or you can get out and you can help others. He said, as painful as it is, you can help others. He said, and in doing so, your own pain may very well lessen, not be eliminated, but perhaps lessen.
I think that's wonderful advice. So what are some other practical things, some self-caring things that you feel you can do to help you deal with some of the pain? But
Some of the
besides ministry and meeting other people, what are some other things that you feel you could do to help you when you get to those times when you may feel discouraged or reliving? Any thoughts?
um Monsignor Ryan was so helpful. He said to me, write out goals. He said, I know you think it's an impossible venture. He said, but write out goals. And he said something to me which I found very surprising. My sister-in-law said the same thing. He said, go for a makeover.
Hmm.
He said, have a spa day. He said, you've never done that before. He said, you never, ever cared for yourself before. He said, go out if you need to change your appearance. He said, Cassandra, the one thing you have to do, he said, is to remember that you're not garbage. You made a mistake. Yes, that mistake ended in a death. He said, you're not the only person in the world in that situation. And again, he said, you could either remain feeling sorry for yourself and just, stay in a position of stagnation for the rest of your life, or you can take the steps to help yourself and to help others.
So tell me about the makeover. How is that important to you? What's the significance of that in terms of you finding healing of doing a makeover?
My husband always called me ugly. My husband always said that I was lucky that he married me, as nobody else would want a woman who looked like myself. And when you're told that repeatedly, the words bore into your heart and you look at yourself as ugly. When I wanted to even just like change my appearance, he would never allow me to wear makeup. I was not allowed to have any type of personal grooming, even down to getting my nails done. And Monsignor Ryan, after he had heard my story and I told him everything, I left nothing out. He said to me, Cassandra, you're not ugly, he said. And I could tell you that, he said, from now until Jesus makes his appearance, but you have to be the one to believe it. He said, this may not be an eternal step, so to speak. He said, but sometimes the exterior does heal the interior.
Mm.
And he said, go with your sister-in-law. He said, go. He said, get that done. He said, you need a new outlook on life. He said, you're not ugly. He said, but all of the years that you were told that you were ugly, You're acting ugly, and if you want, you could even look like that, but that's just not true. He said, it's not, it's not vanity. It's not, like people would say, oh, it's vanity, it's self-indulgence. Because I'll be honest, Dr. George, one of the groups that came into prison, they were from the holiness movement. And of course, everything to them is a sin. Makeup, grooming, electrolysis, everything is a sin. And in a sense, with my frame of mind, that, situated within me perfectly. But he said no. And he reminded me of the story of Esther. He said, Esther made herself beautiful to meet with the king. He said, and you also can be Esther. And
Wow.
that helped me. That helped me. I can't believe that somebody would take that time to make me feel like a human being again. And he did. He truly did.
That's awesome. So have you set a date?
Yes, I have set a date. I'm going a week from Saturday. And as I said to you the last time, my sister-in-law has been an absolute godsend.
Right.
I told her what he had said. She agreed. She said, come on, let's go. Let's do it together. But you know something, Dr. George, eventually, and I mean, I'm so grateful to her, but eventually I'm going to have to reach the point where I will need to live on my own. And these decisions will have to come to me on my own. Babies grow up, babies move on. I'm going to have to move on eventually also, but not before I'm ready.
Right. So how long do you think that will take? If you could just throw out a number.
She has told me I could live there indefinitely, but I would say realistically at least 1 year. Because I don't want to say, oh, yes, of course, I'm ready, and yet inwardly I'm not. I know that this person, this Cassandra, has to be whole before she can completely set out and do what God has called her to do.